It started like any other morning broadcast, the bright studio lights, the cheerful energy, the polished smiles of Good Morning America. But that morning, the air felt different, charged with an undercurrent no one could name. Samuel L. Jackson had come to promote his new film. But from the moment he sat down across from Michael Strahan, the conversation had an edge. The two men, both icons in their own right, exchanged pleasantries that felt like feints before a verbal storm. Michael leaned forward with his usual easy charm. But his question carried a spark. "Sam, some people say your recent roles have gotten too political. Do you ever worry about alienating audiences?" The room went still. Cameras rolled, but even the crew sensed something shifting. Samuel paused, that trademark stare freezing the air around him. "You mean, do I worry about telling the truth?" he said slowly, voice low and deliberate. The tension was instant. Laughter rippled uncertainly through the studio, but Samuel didn't smile. Strahan tried to smooth it over, but the words had already ignited something deeper. What began as an interview was about to turn into a national moment, one that would be replayed, dissected and debated long after the commercial break ended. For a moment, Michael tried to keep his host's composure. That polished calm honed from years of live television, but Samuel's silence was louder than anything he could say. The camera zoomed slightly closer, catching the faint narrowing of Jackson's eyes, the almost imperceptible tilt of his head that millions had seen before on screen, usually seconds before something unforgettable happened. "No, Sam, Strahan began, attempting to lighten the mood. "People love you, man. I'm just asking if you ever feel like maybe the message gets in the way of the movie?" Samuel leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face, the kind of smile that wasn't friendly, but sharp, like a blade turned just enough to glint under the lights. "Michael," he said, voice smooth and quiet, "my message is the movie. You can't separate the two unless you're afraid of what it says." The audience let out an awkward murmur. Strahan laughed, nervous now, glancing at the producers off camera, who gestured wildly for a commercial. But Samuel wasn't done. "You used to be in locker rooms," he continued, tone rising just enough to fill the room. "You know what it's like when people tell you to stay quiet. Smile for the camera and don't rock the boat. That's not me, man. Never was." The tension was electric. The control room was chaos, hands flying across switches, debating whether to cut the feed. Strahan's smile froze, part amusement, part alarm, as he realized he wasn't interviewing an actor anymore. He was standing in front of a man who refused to be scripted. Even on live TV, the producer's voice crackled through the earpieces. "Cut to break. Cut to break now," the director hesitated. The camera was capturing something raw, something that couldn't be recreated. Samuel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His gaze locked on Strahan like a man who'd spent a lifetime calling out polite hypocrisy. "You want a clean show, Michael?" he said, voice rising but steady. "Then stop asking dirty questions dressed up to sound professional." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that filled the studio. Strahan's practiced smile faltered for the first time. "Sam, I wasn't," he began, but Jackson cut him off with that unmistakable intensity. "You were. You just don't like how it sounds when I call it out." The tension snapped. Crew members shifted nervously behind the cameras, the sound engineer muttering into his headset. Strahan tried to regain control, laughing awkwardly. All right, we love the passion. But Samuel wasn't laughing. "See, that's the problem," he said, his tone now cutting like steel. "You all love the passion until it burns your script." For a second, time froze. The audience sat in stunned silence. Even Strahan looked momentarily stripped of his composure. Then, with a deliberate calm that only made it more powerful, Samuel removed his microphone, placed it on the table, and leaned back in his chair. The director finally yelled, "We're out. Commercial." But the cameras kept rolling for a split second longer, long enough to capture that stare. That quiet, defiant, unmistakable Samuel L. Jackson look that said everything words could not. As soon as the red on-air light dimmed, the studio erupted into motion, producers rushing from behind the glass, assistants whispering frantic instructions into headsets. and security unsure whether to step in or step back. Samuel stood slowly, his posture relaxed, but his eyes blazing. The audience, half in shock and half in awe, began whispering among themselves. Some even clapped, uncertain if they'd just witnessed a meltdown or a moment of truth. Strahan tried to smooth things over, still in host mode, calling out with a nervous laugh. "Hey, Sam, come on, man. Let's talk this out. No harm meant." But Samuel didn't turn around immediately. He paused near the edge of the set, his hand resting on the back of his chair, then glanced over his shoulder. "You invite me to talk, Michael," he said evenly. "But when I do, you want to edit the parts that make you uncomfortable." His voice carried across the quiet room, deep and measured. "You can't handle honesty in a suit and tie." The air felt thick, heavy. Strahan exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Realizing the situation was spiraling far beyond the confines of morning television. A producer whispered something about damage control, about cutting the next segment entirely. But before anyone could move, Samuel added softly, almost like a final warning, "I've spent 40 years speaking truth in front of cameras. You don't get to silence that because it doesn't fit your coffee hour mood." Then he turned and began walking toward the stage exit. The camera operator, acting on instinct, followed him, capturing the sight of the legendary actor, leaving the brightly lit set while chaos rippled behind him. It was no longer an interview, it was a statement, one that millions would soon replay, analyze, and never forget. Within hours, the clip hit the internet like a lightning strike. Someone from the studio, maybe a staffer, maybe a tech in the control room, had leaked the uncut footage before the network could sanitize it. The video opened with Strahan's awkward smile and ended with Samuel L. Jackson walking off the set in total silence. In between, there was tension so thick, it felt almost cinematic. By noon, Samuel Jackson and Good Morning Drama were trending across every platform. Twitter was ablaze with debate, half the users calling it the most honest TV moment in years, while the other half accused Samuel of disrespecting the show. YouTube channels dissected every second, freezing frames, analyzing body language, even tracking the exact moment Strahan's composure cracked. Talk shows that once begged for viral moments suddenly had one too real to handle. Memes popped up with Samuel's now iconic line, "You can't handle honesty in a suit and tie." That quote alone became a rallying cry for frustrated artists, journalists, and fans who believed he had said out loud what many had felt for years. Meanwhile, ABC executives met behind closed doors, trying to contain the PR storm. Interns ran in and out of conference rooms carrying phones full of notifications. Someone suggested issuing a joint statement. Another proposed inviting Samuel back for clarification. But no one dared call him directly. Out in Los Angeles, Samuel sat in his study, phone buzzing nonstop, watching the world react in real time. He didn't post, didn't speak, didn't explain. He just smiled, that same small, knowing smile from the show, and muttered under his breath, "Guess they finally heard me." By the next morning, ABC was in full crisis mode. The network's social media pages were flooded with comments, some praising Samuel for his candor, others demanding an apology for what they called unprofessional behavior on Good Morning America. The tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Michael Strahan opened the show with his usual energy, but even through the polished smile, his eyes betrayed fatigue. He read from the teleprompter carefully. Yesterday's interview with Samuel L. Jackson sparked strong reactions. "We respect open dialogue and regret if any part of that discussion caused offense." It was a diplomatic statement to clean, to corporate, and the audience knew it. Within minutes, critics mocked it online. That's not an apology. That's PR poetry. Meanwhile, Samuel's silence continued to speak volumes. Reporters camped outside his LA home, hoping for a comment, but he ignored them all. Then, late that evening, he broke his silence, not through a press conference, but with a single tweet. When truth makes people uncomfortable, that's when it's working. The post exploded, retweeted millions of times within hours. It wasn't just a celebrity spat anymore. It had become a cultural moment. Pundits on news panels debated whether Jackson was out of line or a hero for calling out performative journalism. Hashtags like truth over polish and let him speak trended for days. Even former co-stars and filmmakers weighed in, some applauding his integrity, others calling him reckless. But through all the noise, one fact became clear. Samuel L. Jackson had once again turned a simple interview into something much bigger. A confrontation with the media's carefully controlled narrative.